You unlock this podcast with the key of imagination. Beyond it is another dimension. A dimension of magic, a dimension of dreams, a dimension of Disney. You're moving into a realm of both wonder and fantasy, of news and ideas. You've just crossed over into Disney Coast to Coast.
Hey folks, and welcome to Disney Coast to Coast, the ultimate unofficial Disney fan podcast. I'm Jeff DePauli, and today on the show, we're going to be talking about how Disney was at one point designing an attraction for one of its parks based on the Scream movie franchise. I know this sounds crazy, but it's true, and it's perfect for the spooky season. Joining me to discuss this is Anthony Massey, who has produced the horror documentary Still Screaming, as well as multiple Scream live events. Get ready for the crazy story right after this. Get yourself a free audiobook today at audibletrial.com/DCTC. Did you know that Audible is the leading provider of spoken word entertainment and audiobooks, ranging from bestsellers to celebrity memoirs, news, business, and self-development? You can download titles and listen offline, anytime, anywhere. Plus, the app is free and can be installed on all smartphones and tablets. You can also listen across devices without losing your spot. And they have tons of audiobooks to choose from. Whether it's Disney, scary stories, or anything else you can think of, all you need to do is type it in their search bar and you're bound to find something you'll love. So simply visit audibletrial.com/DCTC to claim your free audiobook today. That's audibletrial.com/DCTC.
It's time to dive into today's Disney dialogue.
Hello, Anthony, and welcome to Disney Coast to Coast. I'm so happy to have you here today.
Oh my gosh, I could talk about Scream forever, so I'm happy to be on.
Yes, so Disney fans listening to this episode, I will admit from the top, this is a bit of a stretch, but I will tell you, I've done hundreds of episodes of Disney Coast to Coast, and I've wanted to work this subject matter in for a long time. And I figure, you know what? It's the spooky season. We're talking about Scream, and it actually has a lot more to do with Disney than you might realize. So just go with me there. If you're tuning in and you're like, Scream on a Disney podcast, it all makes sense. I want to know, when did you become a Scream fan? Were you there from like day one?
Yeah, I saw a Scream in the theaters, and it was after horror had kind of died down. You know, the heyday of horror really died down in the late 80s. And so there hadn't been a really good horror movie in a long time. And so this was 95, I believe?
96.
96. And when I saw that opening sequence with Drew Barrymore, I remembered thinking...
Don't spoil anything, just in case.
No, I won't. But I remember. Okay. I won't. I remember thinking horror is back because this is really scary and it works so well. It just was and that was the first 15 minutes. So I was so happy. And the funny thing was, I don't know if you remember Ghostface. I used to have that was my Halloween costume a couple of years before I saw the movie because they had been selling the Ghostface masks in stores. It was a mask you could readily buy. And I remember going, I had that mask a few years ago. So very strange to see that. And so of course I'm fighting it going, it's not going to work. That's the mask they're using. That's better than Michael and Freddie and Jake, and it worked. And so yeah, I remember it well. And I was there in the beginning for sure.
So funny story about that mask. And I'm not going to give up any names here, but I actually do have somebody coming on the show who created that mask, but wasn't given... Basically, there was some lawsuit, illegal stuff going on. I'm going to ask the person about it on the podcast whenever they come on, and we'll see if he or she wants to talk about it. And yeah, interesting story behind that mask. But in any case, I became a fan in high school, and I was too young to see it. They wouldn't sell me a ticket because it was rated R, and I was like a freshman in high school.
Right.
So this was the first movie I ever snuck into. I bought a ticket to another movie, and I snuck into Scream, and the theater was full because like everybody was talking about Scream, and I was like, I need to see this movie. And like you said, it was just like exhilarating. And I always say this movie as an adult made me a horror fan, and Are You Afraid of the Dark as a kid made me a horror fan.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just remember them like the theater was so full that they were like going through checking people's tickets to make sure that they were supposed to be there because like it was sold out. Right. And I just remember like, oh my God, don't come to me. And luckily they never got to me, but I was like scared to death that I was going to get caught and get in trouble. But I immediately fell in love with Scream. It's such a fun movie.
Yeah.
So how does this tie into Disney? Well, it all starts with Miramax Films, which was founded by the Weinstein brothers in 1979. Yes, the Weinstein brothers, those ones. Before they're known for what, or at least one of them is known for what they're known for today. Did you know about this, though, that Disney owned Miramax?
I did know that Disney owned a catalog of films from Miramax. I knew that they purchased them. I was making a documentary called Still Screaming, the Ultimate Scary Movie Retrospective, which covers the making of all the behind the scenes of the first 3 Scream movies. So when I started the project, I was getting licensing quotes from Disney on the Scream movies. And they also owned the Hellraiser movies and a whole bunch of other movies that they bought. When I ended the project, another company had come in, and a bunch of investors, I believe they were real estate investors, came in and rebuilt Miramax, the brand Miramax that is around today. And they repurchased the movies back from Disney. And so all my licensing and all the stuff I had planned to do for Still Screaming fell to the wayside because the IP holder, the intellectual property holder, changed. So I had to work with Miramax, and it kind of screwed us up. They kind of messed with a few things with our production for that reason, but it did. It started at Miramax, and a lot of their titles went over to Disney. And then later on, Miramax was rebuilt. And that's, Miramax is still around today.
Yeah, it's the long story short is it was founded in 1979. Disney bought it on June 30th of 1993. So they obviously had a lot before Disney owned it. Disney purchased it for $60 million back then. So, everybody thinks of Disney these days as buying Marvel and buying Lucasfilm and buying the Muppets and buying Pixar, which, they do. But obviously they've been doing it even before then when they bought Miramax. And I mean, that must have been terribly frustrating for you, I would assume. I have seen the documentary because it's on like the bonus disc of the DVD box set, right?
Right. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it was very frustrating. And I was going to be doing 2 documentaries with this distributor, so they were ready to fund a Scream documentary and then a documentary on Hellraiser. And then, a week into the production, I had flown to New York to interview a bunch of the cast members from Scream. And when I flew back on the plane, I got off the plane, I'm reading this email from the distributor saying, we can't pay Disney because the titles were repurchased by Miramax. So we had to start over in a sense.
Wow.
We had to go back to Miramax and tell them who we were. And, it's producing challenges. I deal with this stuff all the time, but that was a zinger for sure.
Yep, the job of a producer is putting out fires. That's
Absolutely, you got that right.
Yeah. So now everybody's saying, okay, Miramax, what does this have to do with Scream? Well, a branch or a division of Miramax was Dimension Films, which is the company that made the Scream films, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Dimension is huge in horror. I mean, I remember back first seeing the logo, and anything that had the Dimension logo on it, it was like, oh, this is going to be good.
Agreed.
They really did bring horror back, and horror, the horror genre, the horror fans were so engaged again in, now the studio horror film. So they really ushered in that studio, that big glossy horror movie look, and thus began the 90s run of horror movies with I Know What You Did Last Summer and, Valentine and Urban Legend and all of that.
Yeah, younger people listening may not know that. Like, Scream really, it was my generation's horror run. Like, before my generation, there was, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street. Like, I was super, super young and not born when some of that stuff was made. So for me, Scream was it, and Scream really catapulted these, the titles you mentioned. I know what you did last summer, Urban Legends, Final Destination, all of those just catapulted because of Scream. And Scream was one of these movies that came out in December. So around Christmas time, this teenage horror movie comes out, and it was this silent little movie that just kept getting bigger and bigger every weekend. Like, it was a very exciting time.
It was. And, the thing about Scream is everybody saw it because it was in theaters for almost a year. That doesn't happen anymore. So when you get a movie that comes out and has, moderate success, and then word of mouth comes out and everyone starts to go see it, it becomes it's in the zeitgeist. Everyone's like, oh, I still haven't seen Scream, but I'm getting to it. So if you have a year to do that, you get everybody has seen Scream. I know there are some people that haven't, but you don't have that anymore. Now it's a weekend. Well, now it's a pandemic, but before the pandemic, it's like you had a weekend, maybe 2 weekends to kind of make an impression, but there's no longevity with movies. And so Scream had that going for it as well. So on top of it being this really inventive, fun, perfect popcorn crowd movie, it had longevity. So everybody ended up seeing it.
Yeah. And I will say, if you haven't seen Scream, you should check it out. Even if you're not a horror fan, I'm going to tell you to check it out because it's so darn good.
Well, it's a thriller. They don't even call it a horror movie. It's like Wes Craven's new thriller. It's a thriller, everybody.
It's so
but
good.
It's really a horror movie.
And I'll say go in knowing as little as possible because there are things in this movie that are shocking and truly shocking. And sometimes I wish I could go back and see it again for the first time because I just remember jaw-dropping moments in that movie, and it's so good. So obviously we both love Scream. Now eventually Disney did sell off Miramax and therefore Dimension, and that was on December 3rd, 2010. Bob Iger didn't really see a need for it. It wasn't a priority for the Walt Disney Company. So they sold it off for $663 million. If you remember, just 17 years earlier, they bought it for $60 million. So a $600 million plus investment, pretty good, I would say, for them.
Ain't too shabby.
Yeah. So where does this go? If they sold it off, what does this mean? Well, before they sold it off, they were actually working on, and I'm not going to give the details of where I got all these details because apparently Imagineering doesn't want this information talked about so often. But if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you've probably heard me mention this before. At a convention I was at, I heard an Imagineer say something about a Scream attraction that was being worked on for a Disney theme park. I have since gotten even more information about it, although there's not a ton of information out there. But they were working on a Scream attraction for Disney MGM Studios at the time, now Disney's Hollywood Studios. And apparently, the person at the Walt Disney Company that was really pushing for this was Michael Ovitz, who was president of the Walt Disney Company under Michael Eisner for a very short time from October 1995 to January 1997. And of course, Scream came out in 1996. So it was a very small period of time where he could even have any control over this. So it kind of went by the wayside. Plus, in my opinion, Scream attraction in a Disney park doesn't make much sense to me.
Yeah, he was there at the prime time. He was there when Scream exploded. And so it would make sense. I when I heard this, I thought, now that's really stretching it. It's one thing, it's one thing to have branded merchandise, little figurines and plushies and whatever else you could think of. But I didn't feel it. I couldn't hear it and or see the vision like they wanted. But yeah, it was supposed to be like a roller coaster type of deal, right?
It was. And the thing that really, listen, I don't think we're ever going to see teenagers being murdered in a Disney park. I don't think that that's their demographic. And so therefore Scream would never work in a Disney park. And because of that, the Imagineers who were, I guess, forced to work on this attraction perhaps, they're basically okay, let's just take the word Scream and focus on that. So that meant none of the characters, no Courtney Cox or Neve Campbell or David Arquette or any of those iconic characters from the film. And also, no Ghostface, which to me is the part where like, what? It's not a ghost attraction without Ghostface. In fact, I got upset when they changed the look of Ghostface for the MTV series and later VH1 series. And I'm like, no, Ghostface is iconic. You don't change that. If you're working with Scream, you got Ghostface.
Yeah. They go hand in hand. I think when you speak to the guys over at Fun Worlds that own the license, they own the IP on the Ghostface mask. They were very quick to sort of trademark it so that the image and the name goes together. And I agree. I think the MTV Scream series was a miss. I mean, I liked the first 2 seasons, but they really didn't feel like Scream to me because the mask was so different. So it's kind of like a Halloween movie and the mask isn't really Michael Myers. It's something else, you know? So the mask is integral. And I think when people think of Scream, they think of the mask.
Yes, I would agree. So like not have any of that visual stuff from the films in the ride. You know, they were basically trying to make a roller coaster that would make people scream. Apparently, it was an 180-foot drop where the cars came over one by one to link together and join before a giant drop. Now, I have scoured the internet for this. I couldn't find what this Imagineer was talking about. Apparently, she had seen it in Europe somewhere. So if anybody listening happens to know what coaster that could mean, where the vehicles like separate and go over the edge one by one, but link together before it drops, I'm not sure. Do you have any idea what this is?
No, I mean, but my favorite ride at an amusement park is a roller coasters. I've been on tons of them, but I can't remember this specific format. And I really don't get how one by one and then linking gives you a bigger scream, or like, you know what I mean? It's just another way to do a roller coaster, I guess. I guess the roller coaster idea doesn't feel as inspired. It doesn't feel like a realized Scream attraction. It's like they just wanted to put the big logo on it, you know, the Scream roller coaster, you know, and scream your head off. So that's cool. That's cool. But I think there might be a little more inspired, invigorated idea in there.
Yeah, it's kind of Six Flags, right? Like Six Flags will be like, it's the Batman roller coaster. Why? Because the track's painted black. I'm like, oh, right. Well, you know, like I expect a little more from a Disney park. But apparently, the coaster was going to go into a mirror maze of sorts. So it sounded like, it was going to be an indoor thing. And, the focus was on reproducing the feeling, the thrill that you get in a movie theater more than actually basing it on the IP. So that's interesting. I did find some roller coasters online that are intense. And frankly, if you want to make a roller coaster where somebody screams, I feel like these would have worked pretty well. Did you check out those videos I sent you?
I did. Oh, yeah. I watched them all.
Okay. Takabisha in Fuji-Q Highland in Japan. This roller coaster, it's a small vehicle. So this is what made me look into it, because it kind of sounded like when they were like, oh, individual vehicles that link together. Well, these ones don't link together, but it's a tiny vehicle with like a drop steeper than something that just goes straight down. Like it's frightening. More than 90 degrees. It's terrifying. Like literally I was freaking out watching the video. I'm not the biggest roller coaster fan. I like fun roller coasters, not like terrifying ones.
You don't want to be like terrified.
Not at all.
You want to have fun and scream and everything, but if you feel like your life is in jeopardy, it's probably not, but people love that. So I'm kind of in the middle. Like I don't want to feel like I'm about to die. And the smaller the roller coaster that I'm sitting in, the little car, the more scared I get, because the more fragile and the bigger and more like substantial. It's like the old Hummers they used to make. It's like, oh, you'll never get hurt if a bus plows into you because the Hummer is so strong. It's that kind of mentality when you're on a roller. If you're on some little rickety wooden roller coaster, it's twice as scary because you feel like, well, this thing's going to break down and it's like 50 years old. And of course it's going to happen today. So
yeah, you just described Space Mountain at Walt Disney World versus Disneyland.
Exactly.
Space Mountain at Walt Disney World, I feel like I'm going to die. Space Mountain at Disneyland, I just have fun. Two totally different things. But yeah, this one, not only does it have this insanely steep drop, but it also holds you over the edge before it lets you drop. It's not like, let's just let gravity do the work. It's like, no, let's hold them here for a few seconds, which is insane. One thing that for me, now you say you like roller coasters. I'm curious, do you find roller coasters to be attractive? Because I think they're so ugly, and it amazes me when people get excited to look at a roller coaster.
Oh, interesting. No, I think the opposite. I think they're like a spectacle, and they're the main event, right? It's like, all the other rides they spin or they turn or whatever. This is like you're zooming over crowds and you can look up at any time and see people's legs flying above you. And no, I think the opposite. I think they're kind of octopus-like beautiful and you can watch them. You can watch people screaming wherever you are in the park. It's usually a very visible attraction. So I think they're quite a sight.
Okay, I think I'm in the minority here. See, I like the way Disney does roller coasters because, if it's a Big Thunder Mountain Railroad or an Expedition Everest, like it's very much themed around a mountain or something. And if it's just an ugly track, they stick it indoors, something like Rock and Roller Coaster. You don't see that ugly track, or even Space Mountain. But like right now, people are very excited about this Velocicoaster being built at Universal Studios Islands of Adventure. And I'm like, they're building an ugly track that is obscuring the view of this beautiful Jurassic Park Visitor Center. In any case, it's a whole separate conversation that we're gonna have. Exactly. But it's interesting to me how, like, I just think they're ugly. Even if they're fun, even if I like it, I'm like, it's not a pretty thing to look at. But I guess I'm in the minority. There was this other roller coaster I want to talk about real quickly, the Gravity Max in Discovery World in Taiwan. And this one would scare the crap out of me, this tilt coaster. Basically, the track is separate from one another, and then like the vehicle goes out to an edge, and then when the vehicle's on the edge, it starts tilting to connect with another track and then lets you loose. I'm like, oh no, I couldn't do this.
That's that's a problem waiting to happen.
Seriously, like those are nightmares.
Yeah.
And these are real roller coasters that exist. So all I'm saying is, if they were going to build a Scream roller coaster, I feel like something like that would work. But once again, I don't think you can do it without Ghostface. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
So that's what Disney was working on for Disney MGM Studios. This is a real thing. It didn't get very far into the whole process because, as we said, the person who was really fighting for it left the company. And I think they just came to their senses and was like, this doesn't make sense for Disney MGM Studios. But a company where I think it does make sense, and interestingly enough, was working on it at the same exact time, is Universal Studios. They were making Scream 3D, essentially.
Right.
Where this makes way more sense. It was, supposed to be like a deserted theme park area, and you end up in a theater, and we were gonna get the movie Stars as part of it. And, Universal does a lot of attractions with screens and 4D and stuff. And there was going to be stuff where you see shadows, and the climax of it was there going to be a knife ripping through the screen, and very much like something like their, current Born Stuntacular or the previous Terminator 2 3D, where they have live actors as part of the show. I guess Ghostface was going to come like ziplining out of the screen over the audience or something.
Yeah. And that's more theatrical and more, it feels more inspired, right? It feels more like a Scream event, and I think it makes more sense than a roller coaster. So I really thought that idea was sort of going in the right direction. Maybe one of the things we're not considering is, if you're going to build an attraction like that, you don't install it for a year, it's meant to be there for a long time. Maybe there was concern about longevity for Scream. Like maybe the attraction would have been built too late. And maybe after a sequel or two, the series would have been over and people would have lose interest. And then all of a sudden this, $1 million or whatever event they're putting together is kind of dated a little. Maybe that's something. I mean, if you do like The Simpsons or something, I mean, God, they've been on TV for years. So there's kind of very minimal risk of that kind of getting old. But Scream was kind of like the hot movie for a while. And I don't know, I'm just like kind of riffing about like maybe that was a concern.
That's an interesting point, but at the same time, I honestly feel like the success of an intellectual property, whether it's on TV or in theaters, has little to do with the success of the attraction. For instance, the Fast and the Furious is one of the most successful film franchises of all time, and they make a multi-million-dollar ride out of it on both coasts, and both of them fall flat. So like, just because a movie is a success doesn't mean that it's gonna do well, and vice versa. I feel like, Mr. Toad's Wild Ride is still at Disneyland, and I don't think that many people have seen, The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad. So right. I just think I do think that you're right that in meetings, I think people making these decisions look at spreadsheets like that, but I think it's completely stupid to do because it just hasn't, it has to do with, is it a good ride experience? And frankly,
at the end of the day, it's a roller coaster. It's not really Scream. Right. Exactly. I agree.
But between the two, I would rather have seen like the Universal Studios 3D version versus the Disney roller coaster that has none of the characters that we know and love as part of it.
I agree. Oh, that's the one I liked for sure. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's do a little armchair Imagineering now, because we both love Scream. You've actually produced some really cool Scream stuff. So if you were going to create your own Scream attraction for a Disney park, let's just forget about the fact that like the topic of conversation of murdering teenagers is really not appropriate for a Disney park. Let's just pretend it is. What kind of attraction would you build?
Okay, I've been thinking about this. I think the ultimate Scream attraction would have to be some kind of really elaborate funhouse that you enter with your friends and you're presented, like, what is the premise of Scream? It's, if you can answer these questions about horror movies, you live. And if you fail, you die. So there's this, in my head, I'm kind of picturing like you go in with your friends and you're asked a question, on a big monitor. And if you can answer it, properly, you move to the next room. And yeah, there's fun stuff happening. There's things jumping out at you, but the whole goal is to get through the funhouse from beginning to end, answering maybe 10 questions that progressively get harder, so that, if you fail, which most people probably would, you can at least get through maybe 75% of, the maze. But by the end, and then when you fail, something awful happens, Ghostface bursts through, and scares all of you, and I don't know. But I'm thinking it would have to be some kind of elaborate funhouse that's based on basic knowledge of horror movies. That's what I see in my head, because then it would feel like Scream, and it would remind people of why Scream was so great. And you'd have to think a little bit. A lot of these things you go to, you're just screaming. There's no thinking. You just walk through them and you're kind of just screaming at things. But here you'd have to like answer a question. And I'm talking like a big monitor. It's like, what's Laurie's last name in Halloween? And everyone would be like, Strode, and then, something would light up signifying you're okay and you can pass and go into the next room. But again, you've got like, you walk into the next room, but you have to go through a hallway and there are live actors jumping out at you. And so it's kind of like a combined funhouse with a little bit more, with a little bit knowledge. And you have a goal of like, you're not just trying to walk through the funhouse to get to the other end. You're walking through hoping you get to the end by answering the questions properly. That's what I see in my head.
And this is all on foot. There's like no ride vehicle involved.
Yeah, exactly. Well, when I heard about the Universal idea, it was, that didn't have any ride. It was just like they were just sitting in a theater watching a movie, right?
Which Universal does a lot. Well, so does Disney, to be
I'm sorry, the 3D experience.
Yeah, they 4D experiences are very popular in theme parks.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's pretty common.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, it would be more like that. It would be more like a funhouse. And picture it. They have the huge ghost face. You have to walk through the mouth. Like the ghost face, iconography is so big that you have to, like, that's the doorway, his mouth. So you walk in and it's like the Scream house, and there is a huge house in Scream. So maybe they could call it the Scream house or the Scream fun house or something. And I don't think that would actually get old. I mean, and now with the new movie being mentioned and everything, Scream has always been in the zeitgeist, but it kind of comes and goes.
It does.
But this would remind people of the brilliance of Scream. It's not just, a guy in a mask. It's in order to survive the wrath of, what's going on, or in order to survive the killer, you have to be knowledgeable of horror movies. And that's the genius core idea of Scream. And so I think a funhouse that did that, I think that would just be a very inspired attraction.
Now, another thing that you could do with that, if you didn't want to go with although I like the whole, answering the horror trivia questions, but like if you wanted to do something that maybe more people could get involved with based on information that you have right there in the attraction, I mean, all of the Scream films are whodunit films.
Yep.
So you could kind of work a whodunit element into that instead, where instead of answering trivia questions about horror films, you're kind of answering clues about characters that are part of the attraction and trying to figure out ultimately who's under that Ghostface mask.
Yeah, I love that. The thing about horror in general, like maybe back in like 1996, it would have been great to have a Scream roller coaster, and that's it. But horror now is very smart. It's very intelligent. And, I think throwing together just to slap a logo on it is a little lazy, and horror fans deserve more than that. And I think there'll be a lot of people into it. Like a lot of people, like a lot of maybe teenagers and stuff just want to go and like go on dates and like Scream and that. But there's a lot of people, our age and within the same decade, and it's like, no, we require a little bit more. We want it to be a little more thoughtful, and I would love a Scream funhouse. I would just die if they made that.
Did you happen to experience it when this was back when Scream 4 came out, and they actually made Scream or Ghostface part of the event at Halloween Horror Nights?
No, I actually didn't. I didn't go.
See it?
That's a downer.
Here's the thing. Well, Scream 4 was interesting, right? Because this was the comeback, right? Wes Craven was back, Neve Campbell was back. They all were back.
Yeah.
And it was the new generation Scream trilogy. That was the thinking, was that we were going to get a whole other trilogy of Scream. And it just didn't do as well as, people wanted it to.
Yeah.
So it never went beyond 4. Now, there's talk of Scream 5 for 2022, which we'll get into in a little bit. But to me, as excited as I am about it, and I truly am excited about it, it's concerning because Wes Craven has been at the helm of all of the Scream movies. And frankly, when he wasn't, like the TV shows, they fell flat in my mind. So I really hope that we get a really cool Scream resurgence in 2022 and that it's taken care of properly. I don't know. Are you worried about it, or you're just excited?
No, actually I'm not. And I should be, yeah, I mean, it's like Scream 5. I mean, are they rebooting it or are they continuing? Well, I don't know if you know, but they're filming it already. So the movie's already in production. So they've got to have a great script. I actually heard through the grapevine somebody who read the script. They said it's phenomenal. I don't know. I mean, that's subjective, but they're filming it already, and I have a good feeling about it. I really do.
Well, I'm excited about it. I'm going to hop to it since we're talking about it now, because some of the cast is unbelievable and connected to Disney. But the one reason why I'm always like, no, don't make another Scream movie is, I mean, I guess, spoiler alert if you've never seen any of the Scream films, but, well, obviously she's in the movie, so you'll know that, Sidney Prescott, Neve Campbell's character, is still alive. Right. And I'm just always worried every time that they come back that they're going to kill her. And I'm like, please don't kill her. I'll be very upset if they kill Neve Campbell's character.
She's like the Laurie Strode of the Scream series. I mean, she's just the beloved character, but, I've got to tell you, I love the fact that you don't want her killed because you love the character.
I love her so much.
Yeah, you want to care about the character so that when they die, you go, no.
But I don't want her to die ever. It's so sad. Oh gosh, that's what I'm worried about with Scream 5, and especially the thing I'm kind of curious of is, obviously, Scream 4 will have existed in the timeline of Scream 5, but I'm curious if they're looking at like 4, 5, 6 as another trilogy, the way that 1, 2, 3 was, or if this is kind of its own very separate thing. I'll be curious to see.
I think for me, and I have no idea. I have no intel on it at all. But I think since it's not a Wes directed film, it's probably going to start its own thing and feel more cohesive to the new directors. And I think that's a good idea. And honestly, I had a conversation with a friend the other day about this. I think Wes Craven would be happy, like if we were somehow able to ask him, hey, Wes, how do you feel about this? I think he'd be like, sure, knock yourself out. I mean, he had 4 films. And it's not like if he were alive, he wouldn't be doing it. I can't speak for Wes, but I have a feeling he'd be directing it. I think everybody would say only Wes could do this, but that's not the situation anymore. And obviously it's beloved. It has legs, and everyone's willing to do another go round, and why not? That's what I love about the horror genre is it's kind of blessed and cursed. It's like you always know you're going to get more Michael Myers, more Scream, more Freddy and Jake. You just know it's going to be there. But that's kind of the problem too, right? It's like, how can it still be good sequel after sequel? So but I kind of love that. I kind of love that it just lives on and there's no end to it. When you hear like, oh, it's over. It's about anything. It's like, oh, that pizza shop closed. You're like, oh, I love that pizza. But it's like, okay, there's another Scream movie. It's not that good, but there's another Scream movie. There's always something to be excited about. So I'm all for it. I don't think it's a mistake at all.
I don't think it's a mistake at all. I think the thing that makes me sad is that I feel like there was a 4, 5, 6 in mind for Wes Craven. And so just knowing that there was something that, another 3 that I think was the plan. Yeah. It's sad that he never got to finish that and that we're never going to get to see what could have been, I guess. Yeah. But like I said, I'm very excited for 5.
Let me ask you a question. I mean, it's like so say they make a 5, a 6, and a 7, and Nev is still alive by part 7. Aren't you going to be like, come on, there's no stakes anymore. Like, we know she's not going to get killed,
I disagree with that. I think every time there's a new movie, I'll be worried that she'll be killed. I hope she survives through 7. I really, 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 really do.
And you're a real diehard fan. That's awesome.
I love Nev Campbell.
To still be worried for her in every movie,
I mean, we still got Jamie Lee Curtis, and the Halloween movie. She's still around, even though she's been killed multiple times now. Yeah. Like, she's still part of it, so I don't know. And I don't want that. I can't stand it when they start taking steps back like they do with some of the latest Halloween movie kind of basically said there's only one and the rest of them don't count, right? Like, that I can't stand. I'm like, no, canon is canon. Let's just you might have written yourself into a corner, but deal with it. It
does kind of feel like a cheap way out of it.
Yes.
I think back in the day, it would have been unheard of for the Weinsteins to have made it, to reboot Halloween. That's just no. What they're going to do is they're going to start their Halloween franchise at the studio with Halloween 6. And nowadays it's like, oh no, we're not going to continue from the Halloween 5. No freaking way. We're if Halloween 6 were happening today, it wouldn't have been what it was. It would have been rebooted. So yeah, it just kind of feels, the retconning feels a little cheap to me. And and when they do it twice, like with zombies movies, it felt a little like, okay, maybe it's worn out. Maybe there's nowhere to go after Resurrection. So I get it. And then they kind of retcon the zombie movies. And so it's kind of like, guys, let's be a little more innovative and thoughtful, and let's plan a universe. Let's plan 4 movies and then make one. And then if we get to make another one, we know where we're going. And then you don't have to pull that trick on people.
Yeah, Michael Myers has so many different timelines. Like, I'm confused at this point. So basically,
oh my God, you could ask me any timeline. I'm so plugged into that. But that's part of the fun too. Maybe if you're doing a little Halloween screening in your house, you can pick your timeline, and watch those movies.
Well, the Conjuring movies as well. Gosh, we've gone so off topic. I don't even care. But the Conjuring films, those are so out of order timeline wise, the way that they're released. I want to watch those in the order that the story's told sometime. Yeah. And I think that would be fun. But in any case, I don't want that to happen with Scream. I kind of want the story to continue. And I want Neve Campbell to be fine, essentially.
Yeah.
Sidney Prescott. So back to the Scream 5 real quickly, just because there's some Disney connections in this cast. The cast I'm getting so excited for. Once again, we got Neve Campbell and David Arquette and Courtney Cox. But added to the cast is Dylan Minnette, who I love as an actor. A lot of people know him for 13 Reasons Why.
He's great. I really like Dylan, yeah.
Absolutely. But Disney fans might know him from Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day, the movie that Disney made in 2014. This movie also stars Kyle Gallner, who is another fantastic horror actor. I love him in The Haunting of Connecticut, and he's in the new Nightmare on Elm Street reboot, and he's in the 2016 Disney movie The Finest Hours. And then finally, we got Mason Gooding in the 2022 Scream 5, and he is from Hulu's Love, Victor. So we got some cool Disney folks in Scream 5, and I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah, and also it feels like a Scream cast, It feels like
for sure.
It feels just like Scream 2 felt when they cast that movie. So I really like the casting decisions.
So yeah, Scream 5, I'm super excited. I'm super nervous, but it's going to be amazing, and I hope all goes well. And I'm so happy that it's happening, because this has been in the rumor mill for a very long time. And it seems like in the last 2 or 3 months, it was just like, yep, happening, let's go. So
yeah, it happened really fast. And I remember when Scream 4 came out, the idea of a Scream 5 just quickly dissolved because Scream 4 wasn't really met with great reception. And so I remember people going, oh, that's it. It's the end of Scream. And then when Wes passed away,
I thought it was done.
Yeah, it further cemented the idea that Scream is in the rearview mirror. It's done. But nope, just like every horror franchise, it comes back.
It's going to live on forever.
So, Jeff, what's your idea for a Scream-themed Disney park attraction?
Well, I will say, in my attraction, we would definitely have the classic characters. So we would have Sidney Prescott, Gale Weathers, and Dewey, of course, as well as Ghostface. That is a must for me. So if you're having those characters, I don't want audio animatronic figures of them. I think it's very weird when they try to make audio animatronics look like celebrities a lot of times. Like, I know recently with whole Rise of the Resistance thing, some of those animatronics are scary.
Yeah, it's a little weird and old in 80s, 90s. Yeah.
Yeah, so I would want them, shot on video, seen on screens of sorts in the attraction. So with that in mind, I thought the perfect medium for this is a ride vehicle like we see in Spider-Man at Islands of Adventure or Transformers at Universal Hollywood or Universal Florida. Are you familiar with these ride vehicles?
Not too much, but I think I've seen them. I think I know what you're talking about.
There are these amazing ride vehicles that are kind of like motion simulators at the same time, and they go in and out of rooms, and there's giant projection screens and stuff. But the thing that these ride vehicles do so beautifully is that they incorporate footage on a screen with practical sets, and it's done really well, and the movement is in sync with it and stuff. And it would be a great ride vehicle for like this Scream adventure, I think. And I think what the ride vehicle should be is we should be on one of Gale Weathers' news vehicles, because as we know, she always has a sidekick. Unfortunately, it doesn't always work out so well for her sidekick who's helping her out. They usually end up dead.
Yeah.
So we are now in that role. We don't want to die, and we need to help her find Ghostface. And I think that it would be super fun to do something like that. Of there are a lot of like laser shooter games where each rider has like a gun of sorts or a blaster and aims and shoots, or there's even a Monsters Inc. ride where like everybody has a flashlight and they're trying to find the monsters. I think if we had like our own news video cameras, much smaller versions, of course, or maybe even like a smartphone where we're just taking video and we're trying to find the killer with our smart device or something on the ride vehicle as a newscaster or the cameraman for Gale Weathers, I think would be so much fun.
That sounds like fun. I would love that ride for sure.
And since I am an audio animatronics fan, and since I don't want to see any of the celebrities as audio animatronic figures, I think a Ghostface audio animatronic at some point during the ride would be fun, considering we would go in and out of practical sets and screens. I think that would be awesome. It wouldn't look like animatronic. We'd know it was, but I mean, it's a mask and a costume as opposed to like, fake skin. You know what I mean? Like on an actor, it's a costume. I'm totally down for that. Yeah, I think, I think that's a requirement for any attraction would be Ghostface popping up all over the place, or if he's only going to be seen once, which I actually think is a good idea. I mean, when you go through the Universal mazes and you go through the Halloween maze and everything, you see Michael 20 times. A billion times, yeah.
Yeah, so, and it's like, okay, we saw I like the one I just saw better than you, buddy. Get out of my way, like maybe some of the Michaels don't look right. They're too short, I don't know. Maybe it has to happen in a choice moment. Maybe that, I don't know, but it's the eye candy too. As long as you're having fun along the way. I like your idea though. I think it's more inspired, and people would get that they're in Gale Weathers' van. They would get it. They would understand it. And I think it's not overthought either. So I really like it. It's a good idea.
Listen, I think both of our ideas are better than a roller coaster that doesn't feature any of the characters. So there we go. There's that. I'm such a huge Scream fan. It's so much fun. And you, sir, we're talking about, imagining these amazing Scream rides, but you have actually produced some really cool Scream events. So I'm jealous that, number one, I wasn't creating with you, and also that I didn't get to experience it because they sounded amazing. So please touch upon them briefly and let folks know what you did, because this is amazing for Scream fans.
Well, my really good friend of mine, Nate Reagan, texted me one night, and he said he's a huge Scream fan, and he texted me one night and he said, hey, let's have a party at Stu's house. And Stu's house is that the last third of Scream takes place in this, 6,500 square foot home. It's this enormous mansion. And I said, hey, that sounds like fun. Like, I don't know, it's midnight, something like that. I'm like, sure, let's do that. And he goes, no, they actually have rented the place out for weddings, and it's like an entertainment venue. Now, it's owned by a private citizen, but they started renting out their grounds. And I thought, what do you mean their grounds? I mean, it's just a house. Well, we found out that it's really a compound. And if they're in Tamales, which is right outside Santa Rosa in like Napa Valley area, Northern California. And there's a gate, and you go through the gate, and there's 3 houses and 2 barns on the property. And so I flew up there. We contacted them. Nate actually contacted them. They were open to the idea. They charged us so much money to throw this party that we had to do a Kickstarter to raise the money. So we raised $62,000 to throw a party. When you have $62,000, you can throw a really good party. So
yes.
It was like a day and a half event. There was a bus tour. We took people in big, tourist buses up and down the streets there to go see all the other filming locations, the fountain where all the teenagers are sitting, where he says, did they find a liver in the mailbox? Because I heard they found the liver in the mailbox. Like that scene, the police station, Tatum's house, where they had the rap party. So when they wrapped filming, they had a wrap party. And so we found that location. And so it was like that kind of thing. And then they came back and we watched the movie on the lawn, and fog surrounded the house that night. It was the most surreal, eerie, beautiful thing. We're all sitting on hay bales, hundreds and hundreds of people watching Scream next to Stu's house. And then, of course, we were partying in the house all night, and it was just drinking, and we were doing photo ops in the garage, and everyone was grabbing beer bottles and standing where Tatum, when she saw Ghostface standing there on the top of the steps in the garage, and she I don't want to spoil it, but she has an encounter with Ghostface. So we were doing photo ops. So we passed everybody empty beer bottles, and we had an actor in a screen-used Ghostface costume. It was just one of those magical nights where if you were a fan of Scream, it was just hanging out, and you were like, I freaking love Scream. And everybody embraced you. That's what it was like. We had a memorabilia display. We had auctions. It was just one of those. Roger Jackson came. He's the voice of Ghostface in all the movies. And he came to do a Q&A, and his Q&A was pretty harrowing. He's a funny guy, but he's also really creepy. And I was like, got chills going up my arms. I'm like, wow, this guy's a little twisted. And he was doing the voice, and it was just one of those magical nights. So that was called Scream Comes Home, and that was in 2018. And we only wanted to do that once because it was, I don't like to repeat things. I did the first Halloween Returns to Haddonfield convention way back in 2003, I think. And they replicated every year. So 30, 35, they just did the 40th a couple years ago. And I was asked to organize those events, and I've said no, because I just don't like repeating. I'm like, no, I've done it, and it's not going to be as good. So, but a lot of people wanted to do another Scream event. So Nate and I put together a smaller event called Screamoween, which was actually a Halloween party that was supposed to take place on Halloween night, again at the Scream House, and just 100 people or less, just to make it kind of like just a big Halloween party. Like in the movie, you would just come and party and drink beer, and you'd have the beer bong, and you'd have just a lot of fun feeling like you were at the party. We would blast Bird Brain's Youth of America all night long, because that's the song that's playing in the movie. But there were fires up in the area it was called the Kincaid fires. and we had to postpone the event because the house didn't have electricity. The airport closed. It was really, really bad.
This was Halloween 2019.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the homeowner, we called the homeowner. This was like 2 days before the event. And he's like, guys, there's no electricity here. He's like, if you're going to do this party, you're going to have to bring a generator. And I'm like, but there's evacuations all around. Like they were telling towns to evacuate. So we had to postpone it. And I said to the homeowner, can you just pick a date? We'll just do a Halloween party. We don't want to wait a year, but we'll do a Halloween party sometime next year. So he picked March 14th. And I said,
2020.
Right. And I thought, a Halloween party in March? That's awesome. Like, well, and it was costume required. So everybody had costumes. You could be any costume. It didn't have to be. It was a Halloween party just at the house. Well, March 14th was the last day like America was open. I mean, we shut down due to the COVID virus right after that. So we squeaked by. You know, if it had been a week later, there'd been no way we could have done the event. But that was the other event. It was smaller, and I still have people that went to that event contacting me saying, that was an experience of a lifetime. There's something...
Oh, you're killing me.
I'm sorry.
Seriously, I'm sitting here listening to you talk about it. I'm like, gosh, I wish I had gone. I just want
Okay, well, you want to hear one thing we did at Scream Comes Home? Okay, I'm not patting myself on the back, but this is kind of what the experience was. So we didn't tell people we were going to do something. So there was a wonderful woman that put together a reenactment of the last third of you remember when Neve Campbell, remember when she says, I know I'm not going to curse, but she's like, F you. And then like F you both. And she slams the door. Remember that? And then Billy appears at the top of the stairs. And so the showdown in the house happens. Okay. Yeah. So we had a group of actors reenact that whole scene for the whole last act of the movie in the house where it actually happened. So they reenacted that, and they were brilliant, but we didn't tell anybody. So the woman who's organizing it, oh my God, I'm forgetting her name, and she's going to kill me. Summer. Her name is Summer. So Summer, who was the woman who organized all this, just fantastic person. She put all this together. She comes over to me and she goes, okay, are we ready? And this was like 11 o'clock at night. And I got like showtime. And so all of a sudden you hear this bustle at the front door, a actual door used in the movie. And everyone kind of looks over, they quiet down. And there's like all these people in the house, and everyone kind of calms down, and they look over and they go, oh, someone's cosplaying, like whatever. Isn't that funny? Well, no, it turned into a full-on play, and they reenacted the whole Gale Weathers, and they reenacted the whole last act of the movie. And everybody stopped talking. They pulled out their phones and they were filming it. And so we ended kind of the night with the reenactment of the movie in the actual house. And me being such a nerd and I love theater. And so I was like, this is the greatest day of my life. So it was so much fun.
I regret not going.
Well,
sounds
listen,
amazing.
I have to be honest. There are things I say to people. There are things I've missed. I can't go to that thing that I know I'll never get to go to, and so I think that just happens to all of us. So.
So incredible, and sounds way better than a Scream roller coaster, I might add.
Oh, it was.
Earlier I said, it's a producer's job to just put out the fires, and you quite literally had to deal with fires.
I never thought of that. Yeah, that was a fire I couldn't put out. Believe me,
you couldn't put that one out. But
we had some angry people. I was surprised at people saying to me, "How could you cancel this?" I'm flying in from New York, and I go, you can't even get to the house. The airport's closed. There were people that were really upset, and I understood. But it was literally an impossible thing. And then there was another thing. Even if we did go there and we did bring a generator, to get to the house, and you haven't been there, but to get to that, it's 30 minutes.
Thanks, rub it in.
Right? No, I'm just saying, it's not like the Nightmare on Elm Street house or the Myers house where it's
it's off the beaten path.
It's 30 minutes from town. So if you drive up there, chances are the road could be blocked and you'd never leave. You wouldn't be able to leave. So it was definitely a hazard, and definitely would have been extremely irresponsible to bring people to the house in those conditions.
Well, it sounded amazing. To the listeners, thank you for letting me gush about Scream for an episode of Disney Coast to Coast. And now you know that Scream legitimately has a connection to the Walt Disney Company, which is insane. But that brings us to some trivia.
Do you know the answer? Get your brain gears churning and play along. It's trivia time.
Alrighty, Anthony, do you want to hit me with a trivia question first, or shall I hit you?
Oh, I'll hit you with one.
Okay, let's hear it.
Okay, so Wes Craven appears twice in Scream. He makes a cameo. The first one is as Fred the janitor, as you may remember. Okay,
that's the one I think everybody knows.
So what's the other one?
I didn't realize he made a second cameo. I only knew of that first one. Ugh, this must have been... Is it... where? I have no idea.
Okay, so right. So he was... Should I tell you, or do you want to keep guessing?
I mean, I legitimately... I couldn't even... Is he at the party?
Oh, that actually would have been fun to see, like, Wes Craven in the background at the party as kind of like someone's dad or something.
Yeah, I'm trying to think where he could... Was he working in the police station?
No.
Did he play a different role at the high school?
No. Those are all good ones, though.
I mean, I'm just picking locations from the film. I have no idea. You're going to have to tell me.
Well, in the opening scene, and I don't want to say too much for those who haven't seen it, but he is playing Ghostface, and that scene where his face turns in the window.
Yes.
That's him.
No kidding.
I'm not kidding. That's him.
That reminds me, that makes me think of the Spielberg story with Jaws, where he's the first tug of the girl in the water at the beginning of the film. When you see her get like pulled under.
Oh, I didn't know that. Wait, are you kidding me? That's true?
Yeah, that's true. Spielberg did the first tug, and that's what that makes me think of.
Oh, wow.
Interesting. Huh. We taught each other something new about our favorite movies there. I'm assuming you like Jaws.
I love Jaws. I even like Jaws 3, so come on.
Well, that's really interesting. I had no idea, but that's cool. I want to know from you. Now, Neve Campbell has performed a voiceover role in a Disney animated movie and is in a movie recently announced / released on Disney+. Can you name either of those projects?
No, I don't know.
I was going to say I couldn't either, so.
Yeah, exactly. I have no idea. You got me on that one.
Well, it's a fun little fact. She plays the voice of Kiara in The Lion King 2, Simba's Pride. Who knew? I didn't.
Oh, okay.
And she's plays the role of Laura Sobiek in Disney Plus's Clouds. So that's a recent project. She's on Disney Plus, so that's awesome as well. And just for some bonus fun, David Arquette is the voice of Scully in Disney Junior's Jake and the Neverland Pirates, and Courtney Cox is in the Disney movie Bedtime Stories. So lots of Disney connections. I mean, Disney owns everything at this point, so of course they're going to all be connected to Disney in some way. But yeah, I mean, listen, the Scream franchise has brought me so much joy. I hope somebody listening has never seen it and decides to check it out this Halloween-y, spooky, scary season, because it's so much fun. And even if you don't like scary movies, I hope this nerdy, passionate conversation with Anthony and myself was enjoyable for you. I had so much fun, Anthony. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
So did I. I could go for another hour, but I know you got things to do.
Well, till next time. Maybe we'll come on when Scream 5 comes out and we'll have to connect it to Disney somehow. We'll figure it out.
Let's do it.
Now, folks, if you didn't listen to last Wednesday's episode, be sure to check it out as I chatted with the producer of Tim Burton's Frankenweenie. And earlier in today's episode, you heard me mention someone involved with the creation of the iconic Ghostface Scream mask. Well, he's on next Wednesday's episode to talk all about his work on the extraterrestrial alien encounter, as well as Hocus Pocus. Plus, he shares all of the dirty details about that Ghostface mask. The easiest way to make sure you don't miss any of the magic is by subscribing to Disney Coast to Coast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Wherever you search, don't forget, it's Disney with a Z, Coast to Coast. Also, don't forget that this month's live stream Q&A is coming up very soon, right after I return from Walt Disney World. If you'd like to ask questions about visiting the resort during the pandemic, that would be the perfect time to do so. Find out how you can join the live stream at patreon.com/DisneyCTC. That's patreon.com/DisneyCTC. Other than that, folks, have a magical day. Bye!
Thanks for listening to Disney Coast to Coast. Have a magical day.
Disney Coast to Coast is produced and hosted by Jeff DePauli. Learn more about the podcast and become a supporter at DisneyCoastToCoast.com. This podcast is part of the DePodcast Network. Learn more about this show, plus find more quality and entertaining podcasts at DePodcastNetwork.com. That's DEPodcastNetwork.com.